Day one is in the book.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Want some water?
It's showtime. Here is your host, Carolina Dad.
What is going on, Panthers Nation? I feel like the podcast tonight, I don't know where everybody is. I really don't. Everybody out doing their thing. Maybe they have given up on the Panthers season the same way that I have given up. Not that they do not care. We're having some streaming issues. Let's try to get this fixed for y'all. Coming up shortly. All right. Looks like we're getting there. Well, you know what? I've done a lot of podcasting over the last almost 2 years now. I'm used to no audience. This might be a new record for attendance because nobody just laugh at this. Nobody's tuning in today. Nobody cares about the Carolina Panthers. I guess that's a good thing if you are on radio or TV, and I know they have their own metrics that you have to track after the fact. But maybe it's a good thing that you're on radio or TV and you don't see your numbers. But at the same time, I know a lot of folks take phone calls. A lot of folks have text lines. So you could see the interactions that way. But I can't help but laugh. This is funny. Nobody either cares about me or nobody cares about the Panthers or both or all the above. But it doesn't matter. I don't care if I have an audience of 1, an audience of 0, or, a typical audience, which can run into the hundreds. But you know what? We take what we have and we go with it because that's what we do. And we are here to close out the year and talk about the disappointing loss that the Carolina Panthers had today. And my gosh, was it disappointing. And to be honest, expectations were not high. I knew we were running short on the defensive side of the ball. We're going to talk about who played, who was there, because to be honest, we had more people out than we could have imagined. But coming into it, we knew it. Injury reports came out. It was expected that we were going to miss quite a few guys, but it was bad. And I know there's a lot going around on X right now, discussions around the future of Ejiro Evero. And is he going to be here? I'll give my opinion on that later in the show, but it feels like change is imminent. And I don't know if that means he's retained and or underneath him you make changes. But given the state of where we are, and the Panthers are trending in terrible territory. And I know a lot of people, like, we can acknowledge injuries, we can acknowledge folks being out, but at the same time, man, this stuff happens in the NFL. You have to be prepared. I get it. Like, our guys, we're pulling guys off of practice squads, signing them, elevating them. We can only expect so much, but in general, it's tough, man. It's tough to watch. What we can talk about before we get too deep into the weeds, and actually got sidetracked as I was trying to pull this up, and we'll pull up the full breakdown analysis later in the show to go through the box score. But you know what? It felt like today, I don't know how many people are college football fans. I know I have college football content. I know there's college football folks that tune into the show. It felt like an FBS team against an FCS team. That is what this the offensive side of the ball. The offensive side of the ball seemed to be okay, intact, at least for a little bit, right out of the gate. Go down, score the touchdown like it was nothing. So you thought, okay, maybe we can go punch for punch. And I originally said the Panthers were going to have to score 30. That's laughable now. I said they got to score 30 to stay in this game. No, 30 would have still been a blowout. Man. 48-14. But let's talk about the performance of Bryce Young, because I think his performance is possibly one of the few bright spots coming out of this. Maybe there's a few more diamonds in the rough that we can talk about, but in general, man, across the board, terrible day. Sorry, the replay's up on my side. But Bryce Young was 15 of 28, 203 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Another really good day. And when you think about him missing Taylor Moton, when you think about him having Chuba Hubbard, and then just kind of figuring out between Mike Boone and Raheem Blackshear and not really having a rushing attack, Panthers did everything that they could. He made some fantastic throws today. I mean, putting the ball in a perfect spot. The connection with him and Adam Thielen is ridiculous. I don't know how they have this connection. I hope Adam Thielen has another 2 years in his tank that we can continue to see this happen, because the connection they have is fantastic. And when we can get a few more guys around this team, speaking of receivers, skill players that can help, I'm excited about potentially what the future can look like for this franchise. But Adam Thielen, 5 receptions, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns. Dude is ridiculous. And hey, one of the touchdown throws was a bomb. Got behind the defenders. Bryce Young made a really good throw. Touchdown. Now, performance-wise, I guess what I can acknowledge before we talk about the defensive performance is acknowledging the starting defense. Just acknowledging who was out there, because we were missing quite a few folks. So the starting defense for the Carolina Panthers today, DJ Wonnum, A'Shawn Robinson, Shai Tuttle, Jadeveon Clowney, Windman, Luton, those are your 2 starting linebackers. I mean, you're talking 3rd and 4th string guys, practice squad, literally practice squad guys. Mike Jackson, Dane Jackson, they actually had the 3 cornerbacks listed, so nickel package is the base package. So Mike Jackson, Dane Jackson, Caleb Farley, and Damani Richardson and Xavier Woods. So that was your starting defense. And, you know, there's a lot that we can talk about. The defense is going to be the focal point from here on out. I mean, like, whatever change is going to happen, I'm anxious to see it, like just to turn the page. I'm anxious to see what Dan Morgan and Brant Tillis can do in the front office. And here's the thing. Some people talk about this defense, and they acknowledge that the injuries are there, which we all do. But at the same time, you have to, like, you got to go back, think about every player that we went out and picked up this offseason on the defensive side of the ball. They had some type of tie to Ejiro Evero and his defense and his defensive scheme. This was not Evero going out on the street trying to pick up some random players that he had never worked with before. These are guys that had been in his system. And, like, yes, it doesn't help when you don't have Derek Brown in the middle to help stabilize everything, or at least half of it. It doesn't help when you have Shaq Thompson get hurt, and you've just never really been able to see Shaq Thompson in this defense. But a lot of these other guys that have kind of been misses, Jordan Fuller, you think about Dane Jackson, some of the guys that just haven't panned out. I will say Josie Jewell, Ashawn Robinson, those two guys have been fantastic in this defense. DJ Wonham, been great when he's been back and healthy. Clowney's been so-so, but there's only so much that you can really expect from Clowney, in my opinion, because this is just not the same defense. It's not the same team that he was on last year in Baltimore. So things are stacked against him. Starting defense got toasted, and man. So we talked about who's starting. J.C. Horn was out. We expected this. We knew he popped on the injury report. We knew this was a meaningless game. He was not going to play. He was doubtful. So then it was like, okay, well, who's going to step up? And speaking of step up and not stepping up, I can tell you a lot of folks may be rooting for Caleb Farley. He had a bad game. He did not look good. Saw him get beat. Now, I'll acknowledge that they have a Hall of Famer in Mike Evans on their side. Pause 1 second as we talk about Hall of Fame. Congratulations to Luke Kuechly and Steve Smith Sr. on being finalists for the Hall of Fame. But they have a Hall of Famer in Mike Evans. And, man, we have to tip our hat to Mike Evans. I want him to retire. We now have to deal with Bucky Irving for the rest of our lives on the Bucs. Like, it's like a mini version of Alvin Kamara. We got to deal, like, never ends. Bijan Robinson, fantastic back. It's tough sledding. But going back, Caleb Farley played terrible. Mike Evans coming into the game. I want to acknowledge the fact that he is about to eclipse 1,000 yards. And I don't know how many games he missed. I know he missed a significant amount of time. And for him to still be able to get to 1,000 yards is ridiculous. It speaks to the kind of player he was. I think coming in for the final 2 games, he needed like 180. It really felt like a pipe dream to think he would get to 1,000 when this was brought up, and he did come back from the injury that happened. I mean, we'll get into the box score. Now I'm just curious what his final stat line was, and I've got it pulled up. So let's see. 8 receptions, 97 yards, 2 touchdowns. So he did a little bit more than he needed. He's going to have a big game next week against New Orleans, and I don't think that'll be a problem for him. So J.C. Horn out, kind of getting back to where I was going here. I'm not concerned about Horn being out. There's no reason for him to be out there. There's no reason for Chuba Hubbard to be out there, who was put on IR. There's no reason to put these guys out in a meaningless game. To suffer an injury, you never know what type of injury can pop. Go into the offseason unhealthy, having to have surgery, whatever it is, it's a setback. We don't need any setbacks right now. Devin Tompkins was out. Jack Plummer, who got called up on the active roster as the 3rd quarterback, he's up. My question for next week, and I posted a video, the Panthers have went into tank mode, and it doesn't mean a lot because there's not really a lot of movement that's going to happen. Right now, they're sitting at pick 6. there is maybe some chaos that can happen in front of them next week if one of the 5 teams and the one in front of them that, because I don't have it pulled up in front of me, we can look at it later. But if they get to same record, 4 wins, Panthers say Panthers don't win. What's weird, and I didn't realize this and I should have known it from Tankathon, is when you get into the order, I thought, well, head-to-head would come first. But no, it's just strength of your schedule. So you'll see the strength of schedule on tankathon.com if that's what you use. I recommend it. It's easiest to see. So there the Panthers are at 6, a bunch of teams with 4 wins. So yeah, I mean, talking about shutting things down, I think the Panthers should strongly consider it. I think we've seen enough from Bryce Young. I don't know what you get next week. You talk about meaningless game. I mean, Dave Canales saw how bad the team performed on the defense. He saw enough from Bryce Young, in my opinion. I think you maybe make a safe decision to say, all right, we're going to start Andy Dalton or Plummer in his place and just let him get some reps, or maybe you split it up between the halves. I don't know. There's just not a ton of value, in my opinion, to put Bryce Young out there. And some may say, well, what's the gamemanship behind that if you're trying to knock off a division opponent and keep them out of the playoffs? I'm sure the Bucs would enjoy it if Bryce Young was out there. But I think we saw today just how bad this team is. Like, this wasn't even 2023 bad, in my opinion. This was like 2010 bad, at least defensively. And special teams. We can throw special teams in there because I rant about special teams every week. Not a lot of people do. A lot of people think about special teams. They think about kicking. They think about field goals. They think about Eddie Pinheiro. I look at it as a whole. And since Tracy Smith has gotten here, no offense, man, but it has been complete and utter garbage. I mean, it's week in and week out. The flaws on execution, it continues to happen. We see a block punt today. Segueing in for 2 seconds, shout out to Amir Smith-Marset, former Panther, who returned a kickoff for a touchdown today. Good for him. Good for him. Still getting by. But special teams is garbage, man. And I am the biggest Eddie Pinheiro supporter there is. People know that. Eddie follows me on here. I appreciate it. I hope he knows I appreciate it. But I got to say, it's tough, man. It's going to be hard for us or me to imagine the Panthers bring back Eddie Pinheiro next year. And he was heading in a really good direction. I'm sure he's battling something. When we talk about injury, like, he's probably not 100%. We've seen some misses even on kickoffs, not landing in zone. But I think this is it. Hecker's had some really good punts. But again, all of our free agent coaching changes, and we're really focused on defense. I mean, Tracy Smith may have some connection, and I know from Seattle, with Canales, but I don't know how strong that connection is. Now, you have to acknowledge, the same way you acknowledge on defense, that the special teams unit is typically made up of fringe players that are close to being starters, maybe second or third string, that are on the 53-man roster. And when you look at who we are trotting out there on defense, we're putting practice squad players on the active roster, signing them off of other practice squads. So there has to be some level of acknowledgement that even when we get down that far, our special teams unit and the players that it's made of, probably not the best. And so maybe, I don't know how this whole decision is weighed. And I know I'm going back to Evero now. And you just think about this whole situation. I know Evero got interviews last year with Seattle, with Atlanta, and with Carolina. Made it to the second round in a few of those. But he didn't get those jobs. And then he's back here. You have to remember, the Panthers did not allow him to interview elsewhere for a coordinator position. They pretty much locked him in. And so for me, it feels like Dave Canales is going to want to go in his direction. He's got the 6-year contract. Speaking of Canales, so this is his chance, his time to get his guy. And there's a lot of talk about Robert Saleh, but that's my thought on the direction of where this thing is going to go. I've not even made it through everyone. Maybe on 1 or 2 year contracts. I'm going to have to go analyze this stuff in the offseason, give you my opinion. But it's not looking good for Dane Jackson, not looking good for Jordan Fuller as far as the potential to come back. And these were guys that Dan Morgan also kind of had his hand in. I know Dane Jackson was more of Dan's guy versus Evero, but curious to see how that plays out. Josie Jewell was out. Wouldn't be surprised if a few of these guys just officially get shut down with 1 game to go. And then Taylor Moton, the Iron Man, missed out. Since we're here and since I'm talking about the starters on defense, the starting offense, Xavier Legette, Adam Thielen, Jatavian Sanders, Zeke Okwonu at left tackle, Damian Lewis, left guard. Cade Mays was your center, Robert Hunt. And I figured if Moton was going to be out, Yash would be your starter. Yash was your starting right tackle. Tommy Trimble, Bryce Young, and Raheem Blackshear. All right, I have to go back to the notes now. I've talked through, I guess we can talk about the stat line and really how bad this thing was. It was horrendous. And maybe we start with special teams. I really talked through special teams. I give you my opinion on the special teams unit. When Eddie Pinheiro went out there to kick, I don't know if he's just in his own head. I saw so many Panthers fans that were not shocked that he missed the field goal, unfortunately. He's not doing himself any favors. We already saw last year, this offseason, I should say, that Mevis got brought in. I don't think we should draft a kicker. No need to spend capital on a kicker, although when you got, 9 or 10 picks, maybe that is an option late. I do think they look elsewhere. And again, I'm a big supporter of his. That's my thoughts on special teams. And then, again, just the entire unit. The dog on the punt. They're making such a big deal about it that I didn't even, realize the punt was going to be blocked. And sure enough, punt gets blocked. It was an atrocious day for our defense. And what a day it was for Baker Mayfield. Easy. Like I said, it was an FBS program on offense for the Buccaneers going up against an FCS program with our Carolina Panthers defense. It was terrible, but 359 yards through the air. Bucky Irving, 20 carries, 113 yards. They actually did not have a rushing touchdown. A little bit surprising, but I guess when you get 5 through the air and a blocked punt return, then you don't really have to worry too much. But they still amassed over 200 yards rushing. I think the other thing, too, is like we talk about next year. Chuba Hubbard, clearly RB1. We know that. He's going to command 75, 80% of the workload. Panthers still need to figure out an additional running back. And unless the Panthers make the playoffs, and even then I don't see it, Brooks next year is a wash. I wouldn't be surprised if they put him on IR to start the year and end his season before it even starts. Like, it's just effectively over. We're not going to even think about the possibility of having him return. Not after what we saw. But you look at Bucky Irving, the value and quality that the Panthers got. Here's the thing that I'll say. I will acknowledge, folks, I know I have my opinions, but I also like to listen to other folks. And I think there's valid opinions out there when people analyze the running back position And I take a look at what the Panthers chose to do in drafting an injury-prone running back. And I know it's always like hindsight's 2020, 50-50. Hindsight's 50-50. No, I don't think it's that. 2020. But I will acknowledge folks that point to Bucky Irving and or whoever, say, look, there's quality there. I mean, you can look at Chuba Hubbard on the roster. In the 4th and 5th round, Panthers should have spent the capital on a center, should have spent it on, I was going to say linebacker, an edge, somewhere on the defensive side of the ball. So I will acknowledge that. And I think it's a very valid point. Point being, though, I think the Panthers do have to look at a running back. No idea what Miles Sanders is going to look like next year, but I mean, odds are Panthers are going to cut ties with him, designate him potentially as like a post-June 1 and just get him out. I don't know what the future looks like for Raheem Blackshear, who's really just here as a returner. Panthers do or will need another running back, though. So just curious to see how it plays out. But Panthers give up 200 yards. It's bad, man. Oh, speaking of how bad it is, let's acknowledge it. Panthers have given up 2,830 rushing yards. And I just had this pulled up. You know what? I'm going to go on to X because that is where I have it on my profile. Because I was tracking it all game coming into this. So 2,830 currently puts the Panthers at 12th all-time in rushing yards allowed in a season. That is so bad. So you look ahead into next week. Where is this thing going to land? We're talking more than likely, like if you're going to bet, Panthers are likely going to finish top 5 in NFL history in yards allowed on the ground. So they're at 28-30. If they give up over 121 yards, they will be in 5th. Outright in 5th place. If they give up 142 on the ground, they are going to be in 4th place all time. And folks, we were talking about teams from like the 80s, the 70s. The only team from the 2000s that's on the list of the top 13 right now are the Houston Texans, 2,894. I mean, there is a possibility as I look between the Chiefs, who sit at 2,971 yards they gave up in 77, and the Colts of 3,010 and 78, there is a slight chance that, you know, if they have this 200-yard day, the Panthers could be sitting 3rd all time in rushing yards allowed. It is so bad. Talk about a disappointing performance. And I think that is why I just feel like change is inevitable. Change is going to happen. I never want folks to lose their jobs. I'm not going to advocate for a bunch of people getting fired, but sometimes it's the nature of the business. It is the nature of the NFL. You can't continue to make excuses. And to be honest, if you're playing defense or if you're even playing offense, if you like as a team, it is deflating to know that you can't stop the run. Like there's just nothing you can do. I equated it to, as you talk about an advantage, you as a baseball player, I like to play baseball. We talk about baseball too, but a baseball player going up to bat and you get a broomstick. And you know how thin a broomstick is. Like you have a broomstick trying to hit a fastball and everyone else has a real baseball bat. Like that's what the Panthers are dealing with. It is historically bad. So number 1, most rushing yards allowed in Panthers history. Number 2, most points allowed in Panthers history. So you chalk both of those things up, and I don't know how you make an excuse, how you make whatever a case for Evero being here. There's just nothing you could say to me that says, oh yeah, well, let's give him a break. Because you're going to have to continue to manage the situation that you're given. It's unreasonable to think that you're going to go through an NFL season and not have somebody go down. Now, maybe this season, the Panthers are on the end of having a lot more injuries than most teams. And I know they cycled through today and talked about the number of players on the roster at like 87 or 88, like how many, and which is the most in the NFL. And that doesn't surprise me. And it doesn't surprise me when we go all the way back to training camp and the waiver wire, and the Panthers were one of the most active teams. I mean, it was like week after week after week, just trying to find football players. That's just how bad they are. And this is way off tangent, but it's funny to think that people want, or that maybe they want to expand the NFL. I'm talking about expansion, talking about it two ways. One, expanding the season itself to 18 games. If you're going to expand it that long, can you think about the additional injuries that you're going to have, the attrition on the rosters? You're going to have to expand the rosters. And at what point do you dilute the product that we see? Or, I mean, maybe people don't care, but you're going to have to carry 60-ish players, I think, if you expand to 18. At least that's what I would want to negotiate. So you have an expansion that way in the season, but then expansion teams. And I know there's not really any active expansion happening right now or talks, but can you imagine another 2 teams, another 4 teams? And sure, eventually I guess things would balance themselves out if you have this many players, but I think what we've seen from the Panthers is like the talent, like you either have the talent or you don't. You either have guys that can play football or you don't. And the Panthers have not had that. There's a lot of really good takes out there and conversations about the Panthers roster and how many guys they have on the roster on the offensive side and defensive side. Like if this was all-star game selection, I'm not even talking like Pro Bowl, I'm just saying all-star game, who on the roster do you pick? Like you would almost have to be forced. Maybe is your offensive guy. That's not a knock on Bryce Young. I just don't think Bryce Young's there yet. I think Bryce Young's trending in the right direction. He's 2025 answer. On defensive side, you say Derek Brown, you're like, well, okay, a defensive lineman, a JC Horn, maybe those guys. And even then, it's just like, man, we just don't have enough dudes. And that is what's going to be most important in this year's draft. And whether that's a wide receiver that you take. I'm getting way off tangent. There's a lot of, and this is part of one of the things I want to talk about. There's a lot of discussion right now in the Panthers verse around a T. Higgins as a target. T. Higgins is a number 2 receiver tucked away behind Chase. Like, that's what it is. Not to say that T. Higgins could not be a number 1. That's not to say that T. Higgins could not perform well. But in my mind, I see T. Higgins, and I don't want to pay a T. Higgins $25 to $28 million. Maybe even upwards of 30 because we're the Panthers and we're that bad. I don't see it. I don't see the value. I don't think, yes, he's a good football player. If you can get him for 15 to 19 to 20, yeah, sign all day long. That makes a lot of sense to me. If I'm looking at the Carolina Panthers need way too many dudes. And I don't think he is like that dude. And I don't think I would be like blown away that we pull him in if it is at the price. This before the games today. And so maybe it's changed a little bit since there's been some action. But before the kickoff today, I looked at the top 20 receivers in the NFL in receiving yards. And out of that list, 7 of the top 20 were players that were drafted this year and last year. So 7 out of 20 guys. So you're either a rookie or a second-year player on that list. If you include in the last 3 years, half of the list, 10 of the top 20 receivers in the NFL have been drafted by the team that they're on the last 3 years. So for me, I look at this as more of an issue, which we know that the Carolina Panthers have done a terrible job of drafting wide receivers. Terrace Marshall Jr., Jonathan Mingo. I'm not even going to go back and name everyone. There may be a valid point, and I'm not writing Xavier Legette off, but I understand people that are frustrated with the lack of production, with the drops. I mean, you saw it today on the play, and I think when we talk about injuries, I think he's someone else who's also battling an injury. I know he's hurt. But when you are supposed to be, at least right now, a number one wide receiver in the NFL, and you are paired up with a linebacker, and you can't jump over them or you can't make the play, we got problems, man. You've got to be able to do that. And it wasn't just that. It was there was a miss, and I have not went back and looked at it. But the miss on the scramble drill where he was open and maybe Bryce overshoots him a little bit, but you got to be able to make that play. And then there was another, not to go through this. Like, I think the issue is this: we're seeing this 2 to 3 times a game, and we've heard the song and dance that he apologizes to Bryce Young and he's going to fix it and he's going to make it right. We just have to start seeing him make those plays. And I don't think he's Jonathan Mingo territory. Like, I don't think he is on that level, but I think this is an important offseason for Xavier Legette. And I think he's probably going to have surgery on whatever happened. He's got to work on catching the football. And I know Chuba Hubbard has put in the work because he's talked about it. I know Tommy Trimble has put in the work because he's talked about it. They are on, and it's been reported, they are on the jugs machines after practice for hours. Go ahead and join them, man. Xavier Legette, go ahead and join these boys and figure it out. Just repetition. I know he's talked about some of the things he's learned this year and taking care of his body. That's another thing that's going to come along. He has the talent. When I go back and watch, and like, I was big on drafting him. I was excited that we got him. I didn't think we would get him. It fell into our lap. We traded up, all that fun stuff. But you also have to acknowledge some of the things that have happened around with some other rookies. I look at Ladd McConkey as a really good example. And I will gladly say, I didn't think Ladd McConkey would be as good as he is. And man, he's been fantastic. And so to the fan base, and you have to acknowledge this, that look at a Ladd, look at whoever else their guy is, Keon Coleman, guys that were in that range. It's early. It's very early. I think he's going to figure it out. I have my faith in him. Doesn't change the fact that the Panthers have to figure out a receiver in the offseason, what that plan is going to be. Long story short, getting back on track, Panthers don't have anybody. It is a miracle that they've won 4 games. If we're being honest, I'll take it. I'll take the 4 wins every day of the week. Do not get me wrong. But going into next year, it's like, okay, whoever the best available player is, get him off the board. Go out, find some good. I mean, when we talk about scouting around the NFL, we're going to have to pay the tax, the Robert Hunt tax, the Damian Lewis tax. But that worked out. Find you another Josie Jewell, find you another Adam Thielen, not necessarily Adam Thielen's skill level, but guys that can produce. I do think the Panthers are going to have to swing for the fence. No more bunts, no more singles, no more hit and runs. If you have your mind made up that when you want to focus on defense in the draft, then do that. But if you have your mind made up on whoever the receiver is, whether it's via a trade, I don't care. Go out and find your guy. Find your number one that you can pair along with Bryce Young. And to be honest, it felt like for the first few weeks, well, I shouldn't say first few weeks because it didn't happen until Bryce Young sat. But when Bryce Young sat and we got to see a little bit of Andy and Deontay Johnson, that Deontay Johnson was going to be that guy. And I was over here advocating for Deontay Johnson to be signed. We'll see how that whole thing planned out. He's all the way up in Texas. Houston Texans, my gosh. All right, folks, I am going all the way around. Checking back in on my notes here. Talked about Bryce, and we're going to get into scores and all that, like I said. We talked about Bryce Young's performance. Really good day. I think it's time to shut him down. Just for, let's do it. Who played? Who's inactive? The defensive performance, special teams, Xavier Legette, Adam Thielen, monster day again. The rushing defense, rushing yards allowed, most points in Panthers history, all the bad stuff. So now we can turn our attention, and I will pull it up here so we can share this. And we'll take a look at some of the box scores. And man, I got to tell you what, we're going to start with the first half box score because that was terrible. It was so bad. Panthers getting a score. You know what, too, when you talk about momentum, I mean, the 40-yard pass from Adam Thielen to Bryce Young really helped. You think if the Panthers, I don't think the Panthers were going to win this game, but if they connect on that field goal before the half, you're talking about a 10-point game going into halftime. You get the ball, you come out, chance to make it a closer scoring game than what it was. But I'll pull up our box score here. So first half summary, Bucks went up 7-0. They moved the ball really easily, but you know what? Panthers followed that up with the drive themselves. So 7-7. Then the defense made stops. It was a close game, 17-13. And then the wheels fell off, 7-20, 7-27, and then 27-14. First half. Let's make sure this is sharing correctly, which it is. Cool. So first half, total yardage, and again, it was kind of inflated off of the 40-yard pass. But 155 yards to 337. 337. Some teams don't even get that many yards in a full game. Bucks were 5 of 8 for 62% on third down. We were 1 for 4. Total offensive plays, 11. Total offensive plays, 22. We had 11 rushing yards in the first half compared to 122 for Tampa Bay. Terrible. It's not good at all. You had 6 carries. Oh my God, so bad. But Bucky Irving had 17 for 95, 5.6 per carry. Again, they did not get in. 16 of 20, 225 yards. And I think Joe Person tweeted after the Panthers drive and then after the Tampa drive to kick things off, both quarterbacks had perfect passer ratings. 16 of 20, 225 yards, 2 sacks for Baker, 3 touchdowns, 153.1 rating. Really good first half for Bryce Young, though. 8 of 15, 154 yards, 1 sack, 2 touchdowns, and a 128.9 rating. That has to be pretty close to one of his best halves. Adam Thielen, though, monster. 4 catches, 107 yards, 2 touchdowns. Hopefully y'all played him in your fantasy leagues if you have it. Mike Evans, though, 6 of 48. The jump ball magician, 2 touchdowns in that first half. And then McMillan had the other touchdown reception. We looked at the first half stats. Now let's jump back into the full box score here. we've already kind of talked through some of this, but oops, sorry, y'all. We'll go back over it. So Irving finishes with 113 yards. Tucker with 39, White 30, Johnson 11, a few other guys. You know, the one thing I said too was thank goodness for Kyle Trask taking a knee at the end of the game, because you know what? We lowered our rushing yard total by 2 yards, -2. Raheem Blackshear, 8 for 20. Not a good day. I mean, I had no expectations like for our rushing attack today. That's another reason when you look ahead to Atlanta, thinking about Bryce Young being back there, knowing you don't have a rushing, knowing Atlanta's playing for the playoffs, although, well, they are playing for the playoffs, but they could be in a situation where they have to win. I don't think we need Bryce Young getting hammered around. But Boone, 2 for 11, and then, yeah, Young. Bryce finished 15 of 28 after a really good start, 203 yards, 2 touchdowns, 100.7 rating, one of the best he's had this season. Baker was perfect, 27 of 32, only 5 incompletions, 359 yards, 5 touchdowns we talked about. Probably could have ran the score up even more. So not only are we talking like most points allowed in a single season in Panthers history, this was the most points the Panthers have given up against Tampa Bay ever. And speaking of Tampa Bay in the series, you go back to 2020, they've played 10 times. Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 9-1 against the Carolina Panthers. It's terrible. We are not competitive against Tampa Bay, and I get it. A few of those years, a couple, you had Tom Brady in the mix, but we haven't been able to beat them over the last 5 years. It's not good at all. Adam Thielen finished with 110, 2 touchdowns. Leggett did get 5 for 28. Coker had a good day, 2 for 35, 17.5. Yeah, I mean, I remember one very early when it was still close. He had a really nice catch. David Moore with 17. Chisena with 8. Unfortunately, it's not Chisena like John Cena. Dave Canales did confirm that this week, but Chisena 1 for 8. Jatavian Sanders finally back in the box score, 1 for 5. None for Mike Boone. Hecker, 45.2 average, 3 inside the 20. Did have the 1 blocked. The Bucs only punted the ball 1 time. Not too interested in returns. Fumbles. Yeah, there were no interceptions. So anyways, total first downs, 20 more first downs for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 33 first downs to 13 for the Panthers. Third down efficiency, 2 for 9, 22%. 10 for 14, 71% on third down. Panthers have hovered around 48 to 49, almost 50% third down efficiency. On defense, that is so bad. 204 yards. They more than doubled us, 551. 4.4 yards per play for the Panthers compared to 7.4 for, we get this pulled up here, for the Bucs. So bad. Rushing 39 to 202. Talked about passing. Field goals. I'm not really concerned about returns. Penalties was pretty even. 4 for 30, 5 for 40. Bucs with the 5. Time of possession. This is part of the difference. And actually one other stat, if they have it. Yeah, total offensive plays. 46 plays to 74. Can't win a lot of games that way. That is bad. 18 minutes. The Panthers had the ball for about a quarter. Bucs had, it was more than a quarter. It was a quarter and a quarter of a quarter. Bucs had the ball for 41 minutes. I look at the time of possession after every game. I've not seen it this lopsided for the Panthers this year. Panthers were 1 for 1 in the red zone. Bucs were 5 of 8. So again, defense did make a few stops. You look at the Panthers drive chart. They had a touchdown first quarter. They had possessions, but you have 3 and outs. That's not going to get you anywhere. Punt, punt, punt. Did have a touchdown. And then the missed field goal. Second half was nothing. A punt, a blocked punt, a punt, and a turnover on downs. And I understand trying to go for it, but at the same time, like when it is such a blowout the way that it is, there's nothing to gain. There really is nothing to gain at that point, at least with your starters. Maybe if you want to throw in your backups, do it. Go for it. Like we said, Bucks punted once today. Touchdown, field goal, touchdown, touchdown. A punt late, very late in the first half with 30 seconds left. That's how bad it was. Although, I mean, Bryce put together a heck of a drive there with 30 seconds, got down, got us into field goal range, and we were set up for disappointment. But then touchdown, and the end of the game. You look at the breakdown and time of possession. The Panthers had the football for almost 7 minutes, a little over 7 minutes in the first half. 7 out of 30 minutes. Terrible. A little over 11 minutes in the second half. It's bad. It is so bad. Average starting field position for Tampa was their 26. Carolina was our 29. Defensive stats. Chandler Wooten, good day for him. 14 total tackles. Xavier Woods with 12. Windman with 10 and half a sack. Mike Jackson with 7. Dane Jackson with 6. Okay, I'm not going to read through the list. Crumity, how about Crumity getting on the board with half a sack? And Jadeveon Clowney with 1 as well. Ashawn Robinson, if I believe, was the one that got in and stumbled right at Baker's feet. Got called for roughing the passer. I hated that. Like, what is he supposed to do? I understand protecting the quarterbacks. There's nothing you can do. When you start falling down and you're as big as these guys are, you're going to fall. And if the quarterback gets taken out along the way, so be it. It's not like he was intentionally coming in to knock out the quarterback at his feet. It's whatever. It is whatever. Hold on, let's see. What was this? 82 total tackles compared to 35 for Tampa. That is a busy day for the defense and special teams and everything in between. McCollum led the way with 6. Diaby had a sack. Hall had a sack. Nelson, Cansey, and Braswell. 5 total sacks on the day. That part was not good, which I think a little of it is to be expected coming in late. We talked about the first half summary. Let's talk about explosive plays. And then we're going to hop over into something new. If I can get it pulled up. Here we go. Nope, don't care about scoring. Oh, we don't have it on here. Oh, yeah, we do right here. It's like we always have this. The 10 longest plays for the Panthers, the touchdown pass to Thielen, and the other really nice pass to Thielen in the first quarter. So 40, 31, 25, 20, 4 plays over 20 yards, and 8 plays over 15 yards. Meanwhile, Tampa Bay sliced and diced the defense up. It was gravy, easy money. 42, 34, 35. I'm not going to read it. You can see the number of explosive plays they had there. I'm ready for the season to be over, if we're being honest. I honestly just wanted to cut the game off today. I was like, you know what, though? I didn't have a lot of expectations, so we'll take it. Looks like Atlanta is up over Washington right now. I hope Atlanta loses, but curious to see what Michael Penix's box score looks like, how he's played. I was going to try to get into, if I can, NFL Pro because they have some really good information on here. I tweet it out sometimes, but I was going to try to share it today because I saw part of this is powered by Next Gen. And I saw a stat about Bryce Young being pressured. Yeah, here we go. There's some good stats in here. So I will share my screen. What's up, y'all? Catching up to on this. NW Key says, I mean, it is what it is. Best response to this game. Taint. He says, I'm a Niner and Gator grad. I think University of Florida could take Carolina's T. I think a lot of folks could, man. It looks like a Pop Warner team. It was terrible. Hold on, y'all. Oh. I'm going to share this in a second. All right, let's go back, look at NFL Pro, because there were a few nuggets that they had that I thought were interesting. We'll look at all these in a second. But this one in particular, Next Gen Stats, powered by Next Gen Stats, NFL Pro. Bryce Young was pressured on 68.6% of his dropbacks. That's almost 70% of his dropbacks he's getting pressured. That was 24 times against the Buccaneers. This is the highest pressure rate faced by a quarterback in a game this season. And then we saw it at times. Pressure right in his face, up the middle. It was ridiculous. 8 different Buccaneers defenders finished with multiple pressures. Young did finish 3 of 6 for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns on deep pass attempts, which are 20-plus air yards, doubling his deep touchdown career total. All 4 of Young's deep passing touchdowns in his career have come over his last 5 games. Man, talk about trying to find nuggets of positivity. That's a really good one. You can see his passing chart here, 15 to 28, 2 to 3, 2 for Don. We talked through this. I love to see no interceptions and some really good targets downfield. Now let's go and analyze some of the bad. The Panthers' 551 yards allowed were their worst mark since 571 surrendered to the Vikings in Week 6 of 2021. Mike Evans, we talked about his stats. Good game for him. Hauled in 8 of his 9 targets for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Panthers, with the bulk of his production coming off coverage. Coming against all coverage, 6 for 94. Both of Evans' touchdown receptions came against press coverage. I mean, yeah. Talking closer red zone. 2-yard line and 1-yard line. Evans now has 36 touchdowns against press coverage, 7 more than the next closest, which Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill. He needs 85 yards against the Saints in Week 18 to record his 11th straight 1,000-yard season. Fantastic. Speaking of pressure and passing charts, and maybe we don't want to look at this passing chart, to be honest. Baker Mayfield completed all 12 of his pass attempts against the blitz for 90 yards, 5 touchdowns in the Panthers win. Mayfield's 5 touchdowns against the blitz are the most in a game by a quarterback since Patrick Mahomes in Week 1, 2022. Across all dropbacks, Mayfield generated plus 23.4 EPA, his most in a single game in his career. I would hope so, because he made us look ridiculous. And I really love the EPA stat. I've been diving into that a little bit more. Bryce Young slowly trending up in that direction. What else we got here? Bucky Irving carried the ball. We talked about that. But Irving was most successful against the Panthers in a box of 6 or fewer defenders. It's ridiculous, man. It is ridiculous. Bryce Young is one of 4 qualified quarterbacks to have thrown more interceptions this season. Okay, yeah, this was back on the preview of the game. They released this on December 26th. I already talked about that one. We are seeing Bryce Young be a lot more successful on passes outside the numbers. Going back, I don't think there was anything else yet. The next gen stats haven't loaded. We've talked about the offensive stats. Panthers were never favored, which it shouldn't be. Slow uptick there. Once it was 10-7, gave us a 20% chance. Slowly but surely working our way. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. What else we got? There was one other. I don't think this is going to load. Let's try to look at Bryce Young on the season, as this potentially could be all for Bryce Young this year. I don't want to get into that. They're doing a preview. I don't want to do that. Give me one sec. We'll do Panther stats here. See how Bryce Young is finished out on the season. Hey, Bryce Young, with those touchdown passes, has a positive touchdown to interception ratio. Look at that as a positive. 194, 322, 10 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, 76.2 rating, 6.1 yards per attempt. Love to see that slowly ticking up. 60% completion percentage, folks. He was in the 59 to 58% range. And his EPA isn't great, but his EPA is a little bit skewed primarily because of the first 2 games, as well as the Dallas game that really threw things off. Especially when you look at the pressure rate here, pressured at 34%, 34.7%. Talked about 2.7 as the time to throw. By far, some of his best numbers there. Having an opportunity to get it out. But I think that's all that I'm going to dive into on that side today. Went through stats. Talked a little bit about everything that I wanted to talk about today. Talked about draft positioning. I guess the other thing we'll plug as we close out the season and we close out the year, I will be giving you my thoughts on draft picks, draft positioning. I am not one of those folks that likes to sit in front of, I will do some of them like this, but I don't like to sit in front of the camera and do like 50 mock drafts. I also hate posting my mock drafts and asking people. That's just me. I don't like to post them and ask, hey, what do you think, guys? Who gives a sheet? What you think or what I think? Like, it doesn't matter. So I just like to generally focus on a group of guys or folks that I like. If I was the Panthers, I'd be really excited about that because I know there's some folks that do a really good job on draft and insight. I'm not one of those that likes to argue over who should be picked over what position. To all that, I think it's all stupid in my mind for folks. But I know that's some people's thing. As far as like that's what people want. It's not what I'm going to give y'all. But anyways, folks, that's probably going to do it for tonight. We'll be back with more content as we always are. But until next time, it's Carolina Dad. Y'all have a great night and a happy new year. Be back next week. Close out the season.